Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
At my brother's engagement party, my mother handed me the transfer papers to the company I built and thanked me for finally acting like a proper older sister. I remember the exact weight of the envelope. Cream paper, thick, the kind of stationery our family used for things that were meant to feel significant. I had been holding a glass of champagne I hadn't drunk. Around me, the terrace of the Broadmoor Club hummed, with the specific energy of people who believe they belonged somewhere beautiful, the caterers I had hired, the flowers I had selected, the venue my credit card had secured 6 weeks earlier. When my mother called and said simply, "Daniel needs it to be somewhere nice." Not a question, never a question. She handed me the envelope the way you hand someone a task you have already decided they will complete, with a kind of preemptive confidence that left no structural room for refusal. "Your brother's going to need stability," she said, "now that he's starting a family." I looked at the envelope. I looked at my mother. I looked across the terrace at Daniel, who was laughing at something his fiancée's father had said, his arm easy around Olivia's shoulders, his face lit with that particular warmth he had always been able to produce, as naturally as breathing. He hadn't asked me once how I had been. I had flown in from a client meeting in Chicago. That morning, I had reorganized my entire week to be here. I had approved the floral arrangements at 7:30 a.m. from the back of a rideshare. "Of course," I said, and I put the envelope in my bag. "This is not a story about hatred. I want to say that before anything else, because I've had people hear pieces of this and assume it ends in some dramatic confrontation, raised voices, a scene, the satisfying wreckage of a dinner table. It doesn't end that way. It ends quietly, quietly the way a door closing is quiet, quietly the way an empty office at 2 in the morning is quiet after everyone who needed something from you has already left. This is the story of the daughter who built everything they depended on, and the long, slow morning when she finally stopped. The Broadmoor Club sat on the eastern edge of the lake, and in late September the light did something specific to the water, turned it a kind of flat silver that looked expensive, without trying, which was exactly the aesthetic my mother had always gravitated toward. She had arrived before me, of course she had. She was standing near the entrance with a glass of sparkling water, and the expression she wore at social functions, polished, attentive, the precise degree of warmth that communicated belonging without appearing to try. She was 62, silver-haired in a way she curated carefully, dressed in the kind of understated navy that cost more than it appeared to. Margaret Carter had grown into the life I had built for this family, the way water grows into the shape of whatever contains it naturally, completely, and without acknowledgement of the container. "You're late," she said when I reached her. "My flight was delayed." I kissed her cheek. "The venue looks beautiful." She glanced around with a mild, proprietary air, as though she were the one who had spent 3 weeks negotiating the catering contract. "The flowers are a little much," she said. I had chosen the flowers. "I can adjust the arrangement near the bar if you want," I said. No, a small wave of her hand. "It's fine, Daniel loves it." This was how conversations with my mother functioned. She would observe something. I would offer to solve it, and she would redirect the significance of my solution toward Daniel's reaction to it. I had spent 34 years moving through this architecture so automatically that I barely noticed it anymore. "Where is he?" I asked. "Coming with Olivia." They stopped for photos. At the garden, a small warm smile, the specific one she reserved for Daniel-related information. "He looks wonderful, you'll see." I nodded and took a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Olivia Hartwell, soon to be Olivia Carter, was 28, which made her 6 years younger than me and 8 years younger than Daniel. She was tall, fair-haired, with the kind of self-assurance that comes from having been told your entire life that rooms adjust to accommodate you. She was not unkind, precisely. Unkind implies intention. Olivia's particular quality was more passive than that. She existed in a way that simply didn't register people like me as requiring attention. I was Daniel's older sister, which in her taxonomy of relevant relationships placed me somewhere between distant cousin and family accountant. When they arrived, Daniel with his arm around her, both of them flushed from the cold outside and laughing at something private, the terrace rearranged itself around them the way it always did. My mother moved toward them immediately. There they are. Her voice had the quality it always had when Daniel entered a room. Warmer, fuller, as though something had been switched on. Daniel hugged her, kissed her temple, said, "You look great, Mom," with the ease of a man who had always known. His affection was welcome. Then he looked at me over her shoulder. "Ev," he grinned, "you made it." "I made it," I said. He pulled me into a brief hug, genuine, warm the way Daniel always was, which was part of what made everything so difficult to name cleanly. He wasn't cruel, he had never been. Deliberately cruel, he simply occupied the world from a position that had never required him to notice what it cost other people to keep him comfortable there. "Flight okay?" he asked. "Fine, delayed, but fine." "Cool." Already glancing back at Olivia, who was greeting my mother with the performance of warmth that she had clearly practiced, and that my mother was receiving like proof of something she had always hoped for. He moved back toward his fiancée. I stood at the edge of this small gravity and finished my champagne. The party arranged itself the way these things do, clusters of Olivia's family. Near the bar, a handful of Daniel's old friends from the University of Washington, who I recognized from photographs but had never met, a few business contacts my mother had invited whose presence I understood was more about appearance than affection. Nobody from my professional life was here. I hadn't been asked to invite anyone. I circulated. I checked in with the catering manager about the second course timing. I confirmed the sound system for the brief remarks my mother planned to give. I moved through the terrace with the invisible efficiency of someone who had spent their entire adult life ensuring that things functioned correctly without anyone noticing. The effort required. 3 people asked me if I was with the event company. I smiled each time and said no. The remarks came at 7. My mother stood near the low stone wall that overlooked the lake, a microphone that I had arranged held lightly in one hand, and she spoke about Daniel the way she always spoke about Daniel, with a sincerity so complete it was almost uncomfortable to witness. She talked about what he had overcome, the early years when the company was struggling. She said this, struggling, and I held my champagne glass very carefully, and how he had stepped up, how he had grown into his role. Daniel's role at Carter Logistics was Director of Business Development, a title I had created for him 4 years ago, because my mother had said he needed something meaningful to do, and I had calculated that giving him a title with client-facing responsibilities was safer than giving him operational authority over anything that actually ran the company. He had a gift for relationships, for rooms, for the performance of confidence that clients found reassuring. He was not the reason we had grown 43% over the previous 3 fiscal years. My mother did not mention who was. "He has always been the heart of this family," she said, and her voice caught slightly, and several people near me made small sounds of warm appreciation. I looked at the lake. The silver light had gone while we were inside. It was full dark now, and the water was just water, black and without feature, and the lights from the terrace made long broken lines across its surface. I thought about the conference call I had taken at 6 a.m. that morning, the Hargrove contract, $11 million, my 3rd major client acquisition that quarter. I thought about the night 3 years ago, when the company's primary logistics partner had pulled out with 6 days' notice, and I had spent 72 hours rebuilding the entire supply chain from temporary relationships I had been cultivating for exactly this kind of emergency. I thought about sitting across from my mother, afterward exhausted in a way that felt cellular, and her saying, "Daniel handled the client calls beautifully. He had made 4 phone calls. He really kept everyone calm," she said. I had rebuilt the supply chain. At the low wall, my mother raised her glass. "To Daniel, to Olivia, to the family. We're becoming." The terrace responded warmly. I raised my glass. I drank. I found Olivia near the dessert table. At approximately 8:15, not deliberately, but the terrace was arranged in a way that created predictable traffic patterns, and she was standing at the point where most guests eventually arrived. She was with 2 women from her family, a sister, I thought, and a cousin, and she was in the middle of a story that required the kind of animated confidence she deployed naturally in social situations. She acknowledged me when I joined them, with the brief, pleasant nod of someone acknowledging peripheral information. "Evelyn," she said, "are you enjoying it?" "It's a beautiful evening," I said. She turned back to her companions. As I was saying, the Seattle office has really transformed since Daniel took a stronger role. It's been remarkable to watch him honestly. The Seattle office. I had restructured the Seattle office 18 months ago. New hiring protocols, a complete overhaul of the client intake process, a technology integration that had reduced processing errors by 31%. Daniel had attended 2 of the 6 meetings. He's very talented, one of Olivia's companions said. He really is. Olivia smiled and then, with the specific graciousness of someone giving a subordinate a public moment, she glanced at me. Evelyn has been very loyal to the company. It's sweet she's really been like Daniel's right hand through all of this. She said it warmly. She meant it as a compliment. That was the thing I had been learning to understand slowly across many years. The diminishment wasn't malicious. It was structural. To Olivia, I was the loyal assistant, the dependable older sister, the one who handled the details, so that Daniel could do the important work of being Daniel. Thank you, I said. I excused myself. I walked to the far end of the terrace and stood at the railing above the water and took a slow, even breath. The cold came off the lake in small waves. Loyal assistant, I thought about the night I had stayed in the office until 3 in the morning, building the financial model that had secured our Series B partnership. I thought about the quarterly board presentations I had written, rewritten, and then handed to Daniel with coaching notes so that his delivery would be smooth. I thought about the company my father had started and nearly run into the ground before he died, and the 4 years after, when I had rebuilt it quietly and completely, while my mother said things like, Daniel is finding his footing. Be patient with him. Right hand. I had built the hand. I had built the arm it was attached to. I had built the entire architecture. That made Daniel look capable. Below me, the lake moved darkly in the wind. I stayed at the railing for a while. Nobody came to check on me. The guests began leaving around 9:30. I stayed to coordinate the breakdown. With the venue staff, a 2-hour process. That involved settling the final catering invoice, ensuring the rented items were accounted for, and walking the space once with the event manager to confirm nothing had been damaged. My mother left at 9:45. With Daniel and Olivia, she stopped to find me as I was reviewing the breakdown checklist near the bar. Thank you for handling all of this, she said. She touched my arm in the brief, efficient way she had of conveying affection, as information rather than warmth. Of course, I said. She opened her purse. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper. My name was written on the front, in her handwriting, which was still the same, as it had always been, neat, vertical, slightly larger than necessary. Your brother is going to need stability, she said, now that he's starting a family. I looked at the envelope. I need you to review those, she said. When you have a chance, before the end of the month would be good. I understood what was in it. I had known at some level for a while now. The way you know things you have been carefully not looking at directly. Transfer of ownership documentation. The company I had rebuilt. The company that was generating $9 million a year in revenue. The company that existed, in its current form, entirely because of what I had done. In the years since my father died, being transferred to Daniel, because he was starting a family, because he needed stability, because he was the man of the family. And that was simply how things worked, in the architecture of my mother's understanding of the world. Of course, I said. I put the envelope in my bag. My mother smiled, small, warm, satisfied. The smile of someone who has handled a necessary piece of business. She kissed my cheek. You're a good daughter, she said. She left. I stood in the emptying terrace, with the lake behind me and the breakdown crew beginning to fold the white linens off the tables, and I held the weight of the envelope in my bag, like something I was carrying for someone else. A good daughter. I had been a good daughter for 34 years. I put the checklist down on the bar. I picked up the last glass of champagne from an uncleared table. I stood at the railing one more time and looked at the water, and I thought for the first time, not with anger, not yet, but with a specific quiet of something beginning to crystallize. What exactly has it gotten me? Let me tell you about the first time I understood what I actually was to this family. Not suspected, not feared. Understood with the specific clarity that arrives when you stop letting hope interfere with observation. I was 26, Daniel was 22. He had just finished his 3rd year at the University of Washington. On an academic timeline he was rewriting, semester by semester, dropping courses, the way other people drop plans. casually with the confidence of someone who has never truly experienced the consequences of not finishing things. My father had died the year before, pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks, from diagnosis to the end, the kind of timeline that doesn't allow for any of the conversations you assumed you had more time to have. He left behind the company and a modest life insurance policy and debts I didn't fully understand the scope of until I sat down with the accountant 3 weeks after the funeral, and the accountant spread the documents across the conference table and looked at me with the particular expression of someone delivering information. They are relieved is not their problem. I was 25 then. I had been working at Carter Logistics for 2 years in an operational role my father had created for me, partly out of genuine belief in my ability, and partly, I think, because he knew the company needed someone who would actually do the work. I looked at the debt figures, I looked at the revenue figures, I looked at the operational structure, and identified, in roughly 40 minutes, 3 areas of immediate hemorrhage that nobody had addressed. I went home and told my mother. She cried for the first 20 minutes of the conversation, not dramatically, but with the sustained private grief of a woman who had built her entire adult identity around a marriage and was now being asked to restructure around its absence. Then she stopped crying, and she looked at me. "What do we do?" she asked. Not "can you help," not "what do you think?" What do we do with the implicit weight of we that I was already learning to translate accurately? What do you do, and what do I watch you do, and how do I eventually take partial credit for the result? "I have some ideas," I said. "Your brother is going to need." "I know," I said. "I'll handle Daniel's tuition situation. Don't worry about it." She exhaled. She reached across and touched my hand. "You've always been the strong one," she said. I was 25 years old. My father had been dead for 3 weeks. I had spent the previous 4 days reviewing financial documents that revealed the full fragility of the life we had been living. Strong was one word for it. Available was another. Daniel's tuition situation, as I had learned to call it in my head, a kind of internal euphemism that made it easier to process, was $64,000, spread across student loans, credit accounts, and 2 personal loans from people my father had known socially, the kind of lending arrangement that operates on handshakes and history and becomes complicated when the handshake is no longer available. I consolidated it. I paid it off over the following 18 months out of a combination of my salary, the operational savings I had identified in the companies, vendor contracts, and 2 personal investments I liquidated earlier than I had planned. I did not tell Daniel. I did not tell Daniel because my mother asked me not to. "He doesn't need to feel indebted," she said. "It'll make things complicated between you." I sat with that logic for a long time. Her primary concern in the situation, where I was paying $64,000 of her son's debt, was that Daniel not feel uncomfortable. "Okay," I said. So Daniel didn't know. And because Daniel didn't know, he never felt grateful. And because he never felt grateful, he never adjusted his behavior. And because he never adjusted his behavior, the dynamic that had existed between us since childhood, him as the one who received, me as the one who provided, calcified quietly into something structural, something that looked from the outside like the natural order of things. The years between my father's death and Daniel's engagement were 8 years of incremental, invisible labor. I'm not saying this to accumulate sympathy. I'm saying it because the full scope of what I'm describing requires an honest accounting, and I spent too long giving this family the benefit of strategically incomplete information. I rebuilt the company, not dramatically, not in a single moment of heroic effort that could be pointed to and named. I rebuilt it the way structural damage is repaired, slowly, methodically, system by system, addressing each failure before moving to the next, rarely with anyone watching, always with the understanding that the result would be attributed to the building itself rather than to the person doing the work inside it. By the time Daniel's engagement was announced, Carter Logistics employed 47 people, held contracts with 11 corporate clients, and had a revenue trajectory that attracted 2 acquisition inquiries in the previous year, both of which I had declined without telling my mother, because I already knew what she would say. Daniel was my director of business development. He was genuinely good at client relationships. He had the ease with people that I had always watched him deploy naturally, The warmth, the humor, the specific skill of making someone feel like the most interesting person in the room. These are real skills. I want to be precise about this. What he was not good at was the work. That happens when the room empties. The analysis, the strategy, the operational decisions that determine whether the warmth he generated in a meeting translated into something sustainable. That part was me. It had always been me. The calls followed a pattern I could predict. With near-perfect accuracy, my mother called when something was needed, rarely otherwise. Not consciously, I don't think she sat with her phone and thought, I will only call Evelyn when I require something. It was more ingrained than that. A behavioral architecture so old, it had become invisible to her, the way a house stops noticing its own walls. The call patterns over a given year looked something like this. January, Daniel needs help with the Q1 presentation. Can you review it? March, the roof repair estimate came in. It's more than expected. Do you think you could? May, Daniel is thinking of relocating the business development office to a different floor. He wants your input. He wanted my approval. There's a difference. August, your aunt is coming to visit, and I was hoping we could all have dinner. The dinner I would organize, confirm, and drive 40 minutes to attend, while Daniel arrived 20 minutes late with Olivia and was greeted with the warmth of a prodigal return. November, the company holiday party. Do you think we could do something nicer this year? Daniel mentioned. The clients really responded to the venue last time, the venue I had chosen, the budget I had managed, the event that Daniel had attended for 2 hours before leaving early, with Olivia to meet friends. Each call individually was reasonable. Accumulation is what makes something a pattern rather than an event. I had spent 8 years living inside the accumulation without naming it, clearly enough to act on it. My 32nd birthday was a Tuesday. I had a board presentation in the morning, and a client call in the afternoon, and a dinner reservation at 7 that I had made for myself at a restaurant in Capitol Hill that I had been meaning to visit for several months. I ate alone, which was fine. I had grown comfortable with my own company, in a way that happens when solitude is your most consistent companion. It stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like baseline. The reservation was for 1. The table was near the window. The food was very good. My mother called at 9:47 p.m. I let it ring twice before answering, which was long enough to compose myself into the version of myself I used for these calls: pleasant, efficient, emotionally low maintenance. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice had the quality. It got in the evenings, slightly softer, less organized. I wanted to catch you. Daniel mentioned you've been busy. It's been a full week, I said. Has it? Vague concern. Are you eating? I'm actually at dinner right now. Oh, good, good. A pause. The sound of the television in the background. She always had it on in the evenings now, since the house had been quiet. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. The Hartwell family, Olivia's parents, they've suggested doing an engagement dinner. Something more intimate, just family. And I was thinking the 3rd weekend in October might work, but I wanted to check your schedule because I was hoping you could help coordinate. I watched a couple at the table across from me share something from the same plate. Sure, I said, send me the dates, and I'll make it work. Wonderful, relief warm and immediate. I knew you'd be able to manage it. You're so good at these things. A pause. Are you sure everything's okay? You sound a little quiet. I'm fine, I said, just tired. Get some rest, sweetheart. I will. Oh, and tell Daniel if you talk to him that I need him to call me back. He hasn't returned my message from yesterday. I'll tell him. Good night. Good night, Mom. I set the phone down on the table. The waiter came by and asked if I wanted the dessert menu. I said yes. Outside the window, Seattle moved through its Tuesday evening with the indifferent energy of a city that had no particular awareness of anyone. Inside it, she had not said happy birthday. This was the 3rd year in a row. Not the 3rd time, I want to be precise, but the 3rd consecutive year. There had been years before that, where she had called, years where she had sent a card with a check inside, and a note in her neat vertical handwriting. The forgetting had been gradual, the way most erosion is gradual. Not a decision, not a rupture, just the slow removal of something that had never been made structural enough to survive without maintenance. I ate my dessert. It was very good. I left a 20% tip for the waiter who had been attentive, without being intrusive, which I had come to understand. was rarer than it should have been. I walked home through the cold, Seattle evening, my coat pulled close, the city making its sounds around me, and I did the calculation I had been doing for years, the quiet internal accounting of what I had given and what I had received in return. The numbers had never balanced. I had always assumed in that vague way. You assume things you haven't examined carefully enough that they would eventually, that there was some threshold of sacrifice, after which the equation corrected itself. That love, real love, the unconditional variety I had read about and watched other families perform and believed, somewhere foundational, existed for me, somewhere in the architecture of my own would eventually recognize what I had been doing and respond accordingly. I was 32 years old, walking home alone on my birthday from a dinner reservation I had made for myself, and for the first time, with the specific cold clarity that comes from a Tuesday evening in a city that doesn't know your name. I let myself wonder whether I had been wrong about the threshold, whether it didn't exist, whether I had been paying into an account that was never going to pay out. I was almost home when my phone rang again. I saw my mother's name and felt, briefly, a small irrational warmth, the reflexive hope that lives in the body below the level of what the mind already knows. I answered, "Mom, sorry to call again." Her voice was different now, more focused, the evening softness gone. "I just realized, when you talk to Daniel tomorrow, can you remind him about the insurance paperwork? He was supposed to get it to me last week, and I keep forgetting to follow up with him." The warmth went out of me, the way warmth goes out of a room when someone opens a window. "Sure," I said. "Thank you, sweetheart. I knew I could count on you." She hung up. I stood on the sidewalk in front of my building for a moment before going inside. The sky above the city was that specific. Urban dark, not true darkness, but the orange-gray of light pollution. The sky a city makes for itself when it has forgotten what actual dark looks like. "I count on you." She had said it my entire life, always with warmth, always with certainty. It had taken me until tonight, my 32nd birthday, on the sidewalk, alone, to understand that being counted on and being loved were not the same thing, and that in my family, for 32 years, I had been given one in place of the other. Yet, my mother made her case the way she made. Most cases over lunch in a restaurant. She had chosen at a table she had arrived, at first so that I would sit across from her, rather than beside her. Positioning matters to my mother. It always has. Across is formal. Across is a negotiation. Beside is warmth, is family, is the casual, physical proximity of people who are simply existing together. She wanted across. The restaurant was in Bellevue, her side of the city, 40 minutes from my office, which she knew and had never acknowledged as a factor. It was the kind of place that served a small, expensive menu and kept the lighting low enough that everything felt intimate without actually being so. She was already on her water when I arrived. "You look tired," she said, as I sat down. "I had an early call," I said. "You work too much," said with a mild concern of someone who has benefited enormously from the working and found the concern costs nothing to express. "I'm fine," I said. "We ordered," she chose the salmon. I chose the same thing because I wasn't hungry and it was easier than deciding. She waited until after the food arrived. My mother has a specific patience around difficult conversations, not the patience of someone who is calm, but the patience of someone who has learned to time the delivery of information for maximum receptivity. Feed someone first, let the meal create the illusion of warmth and normalcy, then introduce the thing you have already decided. "I've been thinking about the transition," she said. I looked up from my plate. "The documents I gave you at the party. I haven't reviewed them yet," I said. "I told you I'd look at them before the end of the month." "I know," small nod, patient. "I'm not rushing you, I wanted to talk through the thinking, so you understand where it's coming from." I set my fork down. This was new. My mother did not typically explain her thinking. She delivered conclusions and allowed the people around her to reverse engineer the logic at their own pace. Explaining meant she anticipated resistance, which meant she had thought about this more carefully than she was letting on. "Okay," I said. She folded her hands on the table, a gesture she had, precise and deliberate, that signaled she was about to say something she had rehearsed. "Your father always intended for Daniel to lead the company eventually. You know that." I knew no such thing What I knew was that my father had given me increasing operational authority in the 2 years before he died, and that in one of our last real conversations, 3 weeks before the diagnosis, in the old office on Fifth Avenue, that we had since moved out of, he had said quietly over 2 cups of terrible coffee, "You're the one who actually understands what this place is, Ev." He had not said, "And Daniel will take it over." He had not said, "Eventually this goes to your brother." He had said, "You understand it," which I had understood to mean something. He mentioned it when Daniel was young. My mother continued, "It was always the plan that the company would stay with the family, with Daniel specifically." "I'm also family," I said. A small pause. "Of course you are," gently, the gentleness of someone correcting a misunderstanding. "That is technically understandable, but practically irrelevant. But Daniel is starting a family now. He has Olivia. They're going to want stability, a foundation." I looked at my mother across the table, at this woman I had known for 34 years, who had raised me in the specific way. She had raised me, who had given me everything I had needed practically, and had offered me emotionally a version of love that came with conditions I had spent my adult life trying to meet. And I felt, for the first time in this particular conversation, something I could only describe as a cold settling. Not anger, not yet. Something more structural than anger. The sensation of a wall becoming visible. One that had always been there. "I have a foundation," I said. "I built the foundation. I built all of it." Evelyn, her voice took on the particular quality it used when she felt I was being emotionally imprecise. "Nobody is dismissing what you've contributed." Contributed. The word landed with a specific weight. Contributed implies a partial input, a supporting role, someone who helped with something that was already in motion. I had not contributed to Carter Logistics. I had resurrected it. I had held it together with 8 years of decisions that kept 47 people employed and 11 clients contracted, and my mother's mortgage paid, and Daniel's lifestyle funded. Contributed. "I understand the word you just used," I said. My mother looked at me. "It was a poor choice," I said, calmly, precisely. "I think you know that." A silence settled over the table. Outside the window, Bellevue went about. Its afternoon, the smooth, affluent motion of a suburb that had always moved, as though difficulty happened elsewhere. My mother picked up her fork. "I'm not trying to hurt you," she said. Her voice had changed slightly, softer now, less organized. The voice she used when she realized she had miscalculated something. "I know," I said. You've been extraordinary, Evelyn, you know that. I have always known that." I waited, because there was always a but. There had always been a but. My entire life, the acknowledgement of my capability had been a preface to the but, the pivot point where what I was became the reason I should accept something less. "But Daniel needs this more than you do." There it was. I looked at my salmon. "Daniel needs this more than you do. Not Daniel deserves this. Not Daniel has earned this. Not even this is what your father wanted. Needs, because I was strong enough to survive without it." The logic went, as it had always gone, in every version of this conversation, across every year of my life. The strong one absorbs the loss, so that the one who needs more can have more. The strong one always absorbs the loss. I thought about something my therapist had said to me the previous year, a woman named Dr. Reeves, whose office in Capitol Hill I visited every 2 weeks and whose primary contribution to my life had been the careful, persistent work of making me name things accurately. "What do you want?" she had asked me once, simply, without framework. I had sat with the question for a long time before answering. "I want them to see what I've done," I said, "and if they see it but still don't give you what you need from them." I hadn't answered that. I was answering it now, across a lunch table in Bellevue, watching my mother wait for me to make the thing she had already decided feel mutual. "I want to understand something," I said. My mother looked up. If Daniel weren't in the picture, if he had chosen a different path, or if he'd never joined the company, would this conversation be happening? She was quiet for a moment. "That's a hypothetical," she said. "It's a clarifying question. The situation is what it is, Evelyn." "I know what the situation is," I said. "I'm asking about the principle, whether the transfer is about what's best for the company or whether it's about Daniel needing something to stand on." Another silence. Outside, a car pulled into the parking lot. Someone laughed at a table across the room. It's both, she said finally, and in her mind I understood. That was a satisfying answer. It incorporated everything. It was generous in its comprehensiveness. Both, but both here meant the needs of the company and the needs of Daniel were the same thing. And my needs, the question of whether I had spent 8 years building something that was mine in any meaningful sense, did not appear in either column. She ordered coffee after the plates were cleared. I ordered nothing. She spoke while the coffee came, about the transition timeline. 6 months she thought would be appropriate, with me staying on in a consulting capacity, to ensure continuity. Consulting capacity. The phrase arrived in the conversation, with a specific quality, clean, professional, designed to make a demotion sound, like a promotion in a different direction. You'd still be involved, she said. Daniel would want your guidance. You know how much he respects you. Daniel respected what I did for him. I had learned to understand that these were not the same thing. I'd like to think about it, I said. Of course, immediately, smoothly. Take all the time you need. She said this the way people say. Take all the time you need, when they have already scheduled. The outcome, she brought the documents out. Before the check came, a copy of the transfer agreement, neatly organized in a manila folder. The relevant signature lines, marked with those small adhesive arrows, that turn a complicated document into a simple instruction. Sign here, and here, and here. She placed it on the table, with the practiced casualness of someone who has timed this carefully. After the conversation, after the coffee, when the environment has been made as frictionless as possible, she placed a pen beside it. I looked at the folder. I looked at the pen. I thought about my father's voice, the old office, the terrible coffee, 3 weeks before the diagnosis. You're the one who actually understands what this place is, Ev. I thought about the night of the Series B, 3 in the morning, the financial model, spread across 2 monitors, the specific silence of an office that has been empty for hours, except for you. I thought about $64,000 and 18 months and the investments I had liquidated so that Daniel could finish a degree he never applied. I thought about 47 people. I picked up the pen. I held it for a moment. The pen was heavier than it should have been. Or perhaps I was simply paying attention to its weight in a way I hadn't been paying attention to things for a long time. I set the pen back down. I'll review them at home, I said. My mother's expression moved through something a brief contained. Adjustment like a clock hand, correcting itself. Of course, she said. She smiled. I smiled. The check came. I paid it. She had not reached for her card, which was not a statement, simply a pattern, simply the way it had always been. And we walked out into the Bellevue afternoon, and she kissed my cheek and said she'd talk to me soon. And I drove back towards Seattle with the unsigned folder in the passenger seat beside me. And I did not turn on music, and I did not call anyone. And somewhere on the bridge, over the gray water between Bellevue and the city, I realized that I had been waiting my entire life for my mother to hand me the pen and mean something different by it. She never had. She never would. The question was what I was going to do, now that I finally knew that, clearly enough to say it, without flinching. The Pacific Northwest Business Leadership Gala was held every October at the Westin downtown, in a ballroom that seated 400, and was designed to make 400 people feel simultaneously important and observed. Carter Logistics had attended for 6 years. The first year, we had a table near the back, the geography of companies that are present, but not yet significant. By the 3rd year, we were mid-room. By the 5th, we had a table near the front left, 3 positions, from the stage, which in the social cartography of these events communicated something specific about trajectory. I had negotiated that table placement. I had also, over the previous 3 years, accepted 2 award nominations on the company's behalf, delivered remarks at the industry breakfast that preceded the main event, and built the relationships with the gala's organizing committee that ensured Carter Logistics remained visible in the right rooms. Daniel attended each year. He was excellent at these events. I want to be precise about that, because precision matters here. He worked the room with a natural ease that I observed and respected, and could not fully replicate. He remembered names. He asked questions that made people feel interesting. He laughed at the right moments, and went quiet at the right moments, and left people with the impression that the conversation had been slightly more meaningful than they had expected. These are real skills. I have said this before. I will keep saying it because the story I am telling is not about Daniel's deficiencies, it is about the gap between what he contributed and what he was credited with. That gap at the gala became public. We arrived together, Daniel and Olivia, my mother and myself in the car. Daniel had rented for the evening, a choice that had cost $400, and that I had been quietly invoiced for the following week as a business expense. My mother was in pale gray. Olivia was in something structured and dark. That cost more than it appeared to, and that she wore with the confidence of someone who has never wondered whether she belonged in a room. I was in navy, a dress I had owned for 3 years and worn to enough of these events that it had become a kind of armor, familiar and precise. The ballroom was already full. When we arrived, the warm noise of 400 people performing, professional warmth at each other, the specific acoustic texture of an industry gathering, glasses and voices, and the careful laughter of people who are networking while trying not to appear to be. I moved through it the way I always move, through these rooms efficiently, with purpose, the internal map of who was important and why, running beneath the surface of every handshake. Daniel moved through it differently. He floated, that was the word, the ease of a man who had never had to calculate his welcome. The trouble began at the pre-dinner reception, which was really where the evening that mattered happened, the 40 minutes before the program, when the real conversations occurred and the real impressions were formed. I was speaking with Marcus Hale, CFO of Hale Pacific, a potential logistics partner I had been cultivating for 4 months when Daniel arrived. At my shoulder, Marcus, he extended his hand with the warmth of a man greeting someone he had known for years. He had met Marcus once, briefly, at an event 6 months prior. Daniel, Marcus shook his hand, smiled, the specific smile of someone who finds a person charming without yet knowing why. I was just telling Evelyn, Marcus began. Evelyn's been keeping me informed about the conversation, Daniel said, easily moving into the space. The way water moves into an opening. The Western Corridor expansion. That's an interesting position. We've been modeling a few scenarios. We had been modeling scenarios. I had been modeling scenarios. In a spreadsheet I had built over 3 weeks with projections. I had reviewed with our operations manager and refined twice. Daniel had seen the executive summary, but he spoke about it now with the fluency of someone who understood it at a cellular level. And Marcus was nodding, and I was standing slightly to Daniel's left, and I recognized, with a clarity that was almost academic in its precision, that I had just been moved to the periphery of a conversation I had originated. I finished my drink. I excused myself to find the restroom. Nobody tracked my departure. The program began at 7:30. The evening structure was familiar. Welcome remarks, a keynote 3. Industry awards, dinner, networking. The awards were the center of gravity. Carter Logistics was nominated for the Regional Growth Leadership Award, an industry recognition for companies demonstrating significant expansion within the Pacific Northwest market. I had submitted the nomination materials. In August, a 12-page document outlining our growth trajectory, client acquisition strategy, and operational innovation over the previous 3 fiscal years. I had written every word of it. When the award was announced, third in the sequence after 2 others, I watched with the patient attention of someone waiting for a specific moment. The presenter read our company's name, and our table responded with the warm, contained celebration of people who had expected this but were performing appropriate surprise. Daniel stood. Of course Daniel stood. He was the director of business development. He was the face the room knew. He walked to the stage with the ease of a man, ascending to his natural position, and he took the award, a heavy glass thing engraved that I had envisioned holding approximately 1,000 times in the previous 3 years, and he smiled at the room with the full warmth of that smile, and the room smiled back, and he leaned toward the microphone. This is wow, a small laugh. Genuine, the room responded to it. I want to thank the committee and our incredible clients, and my family, a gesture toward our table where my mother was pressing her fingers to her lips in the gesture of contained maternal pride. And I want to say that this growth didn't happen by accident. We made a decision a few years ago to rebuild from the inside out. New systems, new thinking, new partnerships. He paused. The room was attentive. and that required a team willing to do the hard work even when nobody was watching. I thought for one specific second, one clear, irrational second, that he was going to say my name. So this is for everyone at Carter Logistics, who showed up every day and believed in what we were building. Everyone at Carter Logistics. The room applauded. Daniel held up the award. The glass caught the stage lighting and sent small refractions across the front tables. I watched one of them move across the white tablecloth in front of me, a small traveling light, there and then gone, and I did not applaud, not visibly. My hands were in my lap. My mother beside me was applauding with the warmth of a woman watching her son receive what she had always known he deserved. She did not look at me. Dinner arrived in courses. I ate with the mechanical precision of someone maintaining a performance. Present, pleasant, appropriately engaged. I answered questions when asked. I laughed at two things that were genuinely funny. I refilled my water glass 3 times because it gave me something to do with my hands. Olivia was across the table from me, between Daniel and a woman from Hale Pacific whose name I had given her in the car. She was radiant in the way she was always radiant at these events, the specific glow of someone who feels correctly placed. Halfway through the main course, the woman from Hale Pacific, Sandra, early 50s, sharp in the way that women who have navigated 20 years in this industry are sharp, leaned across toward me. You submitted the nomination materials, didn't you? She said quietly, the tone of someone confirming something they already know. I did, I said. She nodded. I thought so. The operational metrics section was very well constructed. Whoever wrote that understood the actual mechanics of the growth. Something moved in my chest, the small, involuntary warmth of being seen accurately. Thank you, I said. Evelyn has always been the backbone of the operation, Olivia said. From across the table, she said it warmly. She said it with the generous confidence of someone bestowing a compliment they consider significant. Sandra looked at Olivia, then back at me. The backbone, Olivia continued, is such an important role. Daniel always says he couldn't function without her. She's really been like his loyal right hand, his loyal assistant. Honestly, loyal assistant, the second time in recent memory that phrase had been used to describe me in public. Sandra's expression shifted, barely the practiced micro-adjustment of a woman who has learned to register things without reacting. And she picked up her wine. She said, I put a piece of salmon in my mouth. I chewed. I swallowed. I thought about the nomination document. 12 pages, 7 weeks of data compilation. The operational metrics section that Sandra had identified correctly as evidence of genuine understanding. I thought about the award, currently sitting on the table, near Daniel's water glass, the engraving catching the light. I thought about the word assistant. I thought about the word loyal. Loyal, as though the primary quality of my 8 years of labor was its faithfulness to someone else's vision, as though I had been a very good dog. I excused myself at 9:15, before the networking portion, before the room reorganized itself into the configurations that would determine who had access to whom. For the next business quarter, I collected my coat from the coat check. I stood outside the Westin, on 5th Avenue in the October cold, and I breathed. The city moved around me. Taxis, pedestrians, the ambient sound of a downtown evening doing what downtown evenings do. Indifferent, continuous, without any particular awareness of a woman standing outside a hotel, trying to understand what she felt. I had felt things tonight, many things, but what sat at the center of all of it, underneath the anger, underneath the exhaustion, underneath the specific grief of being made small, in a room full of people who could see it, was something quieter. A question, not when will they see me. That question was finished. I understood tonight with a completeness I hadn't had before, that the seeing was not going to happen from the inside of this arrangement. The question was different now. It was, what am I going to do with what I know? My phone buzzed in my coat pocket as I waited for the rideshare. A text from a number I didn't recognize. A Seattle area code, the message brief. Ms. Carter, this is James Whitfield, of Whitfield and Associates. I represent the estate of Thomas Carter. I have a document in my possession, intended for you. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. I read it twice. Thomas Carter, my father, who had been dead for 8 years, who had left behind a company and a modest life insurance policy, and debts and one conversation, in an office on Fifth Avenue, over 2 cups of terrible coffee that I had been carrying for 8 years, like something I hadn't yet decided where to put. You're the one who actually understands what this place is, Ev. My rideshare arrived. A silver Prius. The driver had the radio on low, something quiet, instrumental. I got in. I looked at the text again. A document intended for you. Outside the window, Seattle moved through its Friday night, lit and continuous and without pause, and I sat with the specific stillness of someone who has just felt the ground shift beneath them in a way they cannot yet measure. Yet, James Whitfield's office was on the 14th floor of a building on 2nd Avenue, the kind of legal office that communicates seriousness through restraint, dark wood, minimal decoration, a receptionist who spoke quietly and offered water before you asked. I arrived on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after the gala. I had not told my mother about the text. I had not told Daniel. I had spent 10 days moving through my normal life, the early calls, the operational reviews, the careful management of a company I had built, and was being asked to surrender, with the text sitting in my phone, like a door I hadn't yet decided to open, a document intended for you. I had been intended things my entire life. Most of them turned out to be obligations, dressed in the language of gifts. I sat in Whitfield's office. He was 60, careful with the manner of a man who had delivered difficult information many times and had learned to create space around it. And he set an envelope on the desk. Between us, standard business envelope, white sealed, my name on the front in handwriting. I recognized the way you recognize a voice you haven't heard in years. Immediately, physically, in the body before the mind. My father's handwriting. He left this with our office approximately 18 months. Before he passed, Whitfield said, the instructions were specific. It was to be delivered to you, personally and only to you, no earlier than 5 years. After the date of his death, 5 years, it had been 8. We had some administrative difficulty locating you, he said with the mild, professional regret of someone acknowledging a delay they consider unfortunate. I moved offices twice, I said. Yes, we found you through the business registry. I looked at the envelope. Is there anything else? I asked. No, it's simply the letter. A pause. Would you like a moment alone before you open it? I thought about this. No, I said, I'll take it with me. I did not open it in the elevator. I did not open it in the lobby, or on the street, or in the coffee shop, on the corner where I sat for 20 minutes, with an untouched Americano, and the envelope on the table, and the specific paralysis of someone who understands that some information, once received, cannot be unreceived. I drove back to the office. It was 11:15. The floor was occupied. The sound of the open plan, keyboards and quiet voices, and the particular energy of a Tuesday morning in a company that was functioning. My company. I walked through it to my office. Glass-walled corner, the view, facing northeast toward the water, and I closed the door. I sat at my desk. I set the envelope in front of me. Outside the glass, the floor moved through its morning without awareness of what was happening in here, which was the same way it had always moved, I thought, without awareness of what was happening in here. I opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages. His handwriting neat but not precise. The handwriting of a man who thought faster than he wrote, covered both sides of each page in the blue ink he had always used, a specific brand of rollerball he had bought in bulk from an office supply catalog and kept in his desk, in a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Boss," a gift I had given him when I was 19 and that he had used, without irony, for the remaining years of his life. I don't know if I have much time left. He had written at the top, I'm writing this in March. The doctors are optimistic, but doctors are paid to be optimistic, and I have always preferred to be prepared. I smiled at this briefly. Then I kept reading. Evelyn, I've been trying to write this for 3 weeks, and every version I start sounds either too clinic or too sentimental, and I'm not sure I'm capable of threading that needle. So I'm going to try to just say things clearly and trust you to understand what I mean. You are the most capable person I have ever known. I don't say that lightly. I've known capable people, but you have a quality I don't have. A single word for a combination of intelligence and endurance and the ability to hold more weight than anyone should have to hold, without letting it show. I recognized it in you. When you were very young, I think I made a mistake with it. I stopped. I read that line again. I think I made a mistake with it. I kept reading. I relied on that quality in you, the way you rely on something. That has never failed, which is to say, without enough thought, for what the relying costs. Your mother and I. This is difficult to write. We made assumptions about you that we never examined closely enough. That because you were capable, you were also okay. That because you handled things, you didn't need things. That because you never asked for what Daniel asked for, you didn't want it. These are not the same things. I know that. I think I knew it while it was happening, and I didn't change it. And that is something I have to be honest with you about. I didn't change it in part because changing it would have required a harder conversation with your mother than I was willing to have. That is the truth. I'm not proud of it. Your mother loves you. I want you to understand that, even as I'm telling you, that the way she loves you is incomplete. She loves the version of you that is strong and capable and doesn't require much. She has not done the work of knowing the version of you underneath that. I think that's because the strong version was so immediately useful, and the underneath version required something of her she didn't know how to give. I should have insisted she learn. I didn't. I have spent a long time thinking about why. The honest answer is that it was easier to let the arrangement continue than to disrupt it. You were okay. You were always okay. And Daniel was not always okay. And your mother's attention went to wherever the distress was. This is not an excuse. I'm writing this because I want you to have at least one person tell you clearly you were not okay because you didn't need things. You were okay because you learned very early that needing things wasn't available to you. That's different. I want you to know that I saw the difference. I paused here for a long time. The office outside my glass walls continued its Tuesday morning. Someone was on a call. Someone else was laughing at something on their screen. The water in the distance was the same flat gray it had been when I arrived that morning, the specific Seattle gray that is not quite blue and not quite nothing that I had looked at from this window for 4 years. I pressed my fingers against my mouth. I kept reading. The company. I need to tell you about the company. What I always intended was for you to have it. Not Daniel, not because Daniel isn't my son and I don't love him. I love him completely, the way I love you completely, even when that love was expressed differently than it should have been. But the company is yours. You understand it. You built it into what it is. I started it and I ran it for 20 years and I was adequate at it, Evelyn. I was adequate. You are not adequate at this. You are exceptional. I always meant to tell you that more. What I need you to know is this. There is a separate documentation folder in the Whitfield files. Ask James, he'll have it. That contains my original partnership agreement with the company's founding structure. My intention, documented in 2004, was equal ownership split between my 2 children upon succession, not preferential to Daniel. Equal, what your mother has likely been telling you. And I know your mother, Evelyn. I know exactly what she has been telling you, is that I wanted Daniel to lead. I wanted Daniel to have a role. I wanted you to lead. There's a difference. I should have said it to you while I was alive to say it. I'm saying it now. I'm sorry it's arriving this way. I'm sorry about many things. The last thing I want to say is this. Whatever you decide to do, whatever you decide you need, for your own life, your own work, your own sense of what you're worth, do not let the arrangement determine your value. The arrangement was built around your endurance. It was not built to honor it. There is a difference. Know the difference. I love you. I always have. Dad. I set the letter down. I sat with it for a while. The office around me continued. The gray water continued. At some point I realized my face was wet. Not dramatically, not the way grief is depicted with sounds and the visible collapse of the body giving way. Just wet. The quiet kind. The kind that happens when something you have been holding for a very long time is finally put down. I had not cried at my father's funeral. I had organized the funeral. I had managed the catering and the flowers and the logistics of grief, the calls, the arrangements, the careful management of my mother's emotional collapse, and I had done it with the efficiency I applied to everything, and I had not cried. And afterward, my mother had said, in a tone that was partly admiration, and partly something else, "You're so strong." I had been 25 years old. I had been standing at my father's grave, in the November cold, managing a feeling I hadn't had language for. Now I was 34, in an office I had built, reading a letter my father had written 8 years ago and left in a drawer, for me to find when I was ready, and I understood, reading it, that he had known and he had been inadequate to the knowing. His word adequate applied with the honesty of a man reckoning with his own limits, and he had loved me, and he had failed me in the specific way that people who love you and are afraid of conflict can fail you quietly over years by choosing the easier path. I did not forgive him in that moment, but I held both things, the love and the failure, and I let them both be true. I called James Whitfield's office from my desk at 2 in the afternoon. He confirmed the partnership document. He walked me through its contents with the careful precision of a man who understood. He was handing someone a significant thing, equal ownership upon succession. My father's signature, dated November 14, 2004. I was 12 years old in 2004. My father had been thinking about this for 30 years. I stayed in the office until 11, not working, in the way I usually worked, with purpose and direction, and the forward momentum of someone managing toward an outcome. I read the letter twice more. I watched the water go dark as the city settled into evening. I thought about 8 years. I thought about 47 people whose employment existed because of decisions I had made. I thought about 11 clients. I thought about the transfer documents in my bag unsigned, where they had been for 3 weeks. I thought about my mother handing me the pen with the preemptive confidence of someone who had already decided the outcome. I thought about my father's handwriting. "You are not adequate at this. You are exceptional." At 11:47, I opened my laptop. I opened my email. I typed for 4 minutes. The email was addressed to the company's board of directors, 3 people, 2 of whom were external advisors. I had recruited, one of whom was Daniel. The subject line said, "Resignation, effective 30 days. The body was 6 sentences. I did not explain. I did not apologize. I did not soften it with the language of transition, or gratitude, or the careful diplomacy of someone managing other people's feelings about their own departure. 6 sentences. The facts, the timeline, my signature. I pressed send. The email left the outbox with the small, immediate finality of all irrevocable things. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark office for a few more minutes. The city outside, the water, the quiet floor around me, and I felt something I had not felt in so long. I had nearly forgotten. It was available to me. Not happiness, not yet. Something earlier than happiness. The first breath after you've been holding something for a very long time. The specific lightness of a hand that has finally put down what it was carrying. I picked up my bag. I picked up my father's letter. I turned off the office light, and I walked out. The first call came at 7:14. The following morning, I was making coffee, the slow kind, the pour-over method I had adopted 2 years ago when I decided that the small rituals of a morning deserved to be done with intention. When my phone lit up on the counter, Sandra Hale, I looked at it for a moment. Then I answered. Sandra, Evelyn, her voice had the quality it got when she was being direct, which was most of the time, which was why I liked her. I got a forwarded email this morning from your company's general inbox, something about a transition in leadership. The board had moved quickly. Yes, I said, I've resigned. Effective 30 days. A pause. I see another pause. Longer this time. And the Hale Pacific conversation. The Western Corridor Partnership. That was primarily your initiative. It was, I said. Are you going somewhere specific? Or is this a pause? I poured the water in a slow circle. Over the grounds. I'm going somewhere specific, I said. I don't have the details finalized yet. When you do, Sandra said, I'd like to have a conversation. I set the kettle down. I'd like that too, I said. She hung up without ceremony, which was also why I liked her. The calls accumulated over the following week, the way water accumulates in a low place. Gradually, then all at once, 3 of our 11 clients called my personal number directly. Within the first 4 days, not the company main line, not Daniel's extension. Mind, these were relationships I had built, in some cases over years, in some cases through specific moments of crisis management where I had demonstrated under pressure that I was the person who understood what they needed and could deliver it. Relationships, I was learning, do not transfer with an org chart. They follow the person. Marcus Hale called on day 3. He was warmer than Sandra, more relational, more circular, in his communication style, but the substance of the call was the same. "I want to understand the situation," he said. "I've left the company," I said. "Does that mean the expansion modeling we've been discussing is mine?" I said. "The work I've done is mine. I didn't use company resources to develop the core analysis." A careful silence. "I'd like to continue the conversation," he said, "in whatever context makes sense for where you land." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat with a specific feeling of watching something you built reveal in your absence exactly what it was built on. Daniel called on day 2. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 4 minutes long. I know because I looked at the timestamp without listening to it, and when I finally played it, 3 days after he left it, it moved through the predictable, emotional architecture of a man who had just discovered that the floor he had been standing on was not structural. The first minute was confusion. The second was hurt, the genuine variety, which I want to acknowledge, because Daniel's hurt was real. He had not understood, I think, the full weight of what he had been given, or what it had cost. That is a different kind of culpability than knowing and not caring, but it is culpability nonetheless. The third minute was something, approaching panic. The fourth was an ask. I need you to call me back, Ev. I need to understand what's happening. The Hargrove account, they called, asking specifically for you, and I didn't know what to say. Can you call me?" I set the phone down. I thought about the night I had secured the Hargrove account 14 months ago, a dinner that had run until 10:30, a follow-up proposal I had written on a Sunday starting at 8 a.m., finishing at 3 in the afternoon, a second meeting I had requested and prepared for and delivered. Daniel had attended the first dinner. He had ordered the good bourbon and talked about fly fishing and left them charmed. I had secured the account. There is a difference. I did not go into the office. During the first 2 weeks, the 30-day notice period I had decided would be served through the documentation I was methodically preparing, transition files, client relationship summaries, operational procedure records, delivered digitally, organized with the same precision I had applied to everything in 8 years, because my standards had never been about the arrangement I was in. They were mine. They would remain mine. When the arrangement was gone, I worked from my apartment, the one in Capitol Hill, 7th floor, with the view of the hill's tree line, and on clear days, a slant of the sound, in the specific, focused quiet of someone who has removed herself from a system and can finally see its entire shape. The calls continued. The company's external communications, I learned through Sandra, had become noticeably less coherent. Client-facing correspondence that had previously been precise and professionally calibrated was arriving with the slightly uncertain quality of writing produced by someone working from a template they didn't fully understand. Daniel's writing, he was trying. I could see in the forwarded samples Sandra sent me with the clip, observational neutrality of someone noting a weather pattern, that he was genuinely trying. He simply didn't have the 8 years of operational architecture in his head that made the precision possible. You cannot download competence from an org chart. The investors called on day 11, 2 of them the external partners from the Series B round that I had secured 3 years prior, reached out through my personal email rather than the company address. Both emails were professionally warm and contained the same core information. In different framings, they had significant concerns about the transition. They had valued specifically my role in the company's strategic direction. They would appreciate a conversation about my plans. I replied to both. I scheduled the conversations. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Daniel. I sat in my apartment in the quiet of a weekday morning, and I understood with a completeness I had not previously had what I had actually been worth to the structure I had built. And for the first time, in a very long time, the understanding felt like information rather than wound. My mother called 6 times. In the first week, I answered twice. The first time she was confused. The genuine variety, the confusion of someone whose understanding of events was filtered entirely through Daniel's account of them. I don't understand why you didn't. Talk to me first, she said. I made a professional decision, I said. Evelyn, this affects the whole family. It affects the company, I said, which is a separate thing. A pause. Is it, she said. And in that question, small, genuinely uncertain, I heard the first crack in the architecture of my mother's understanding of how things work. The company and the family had always been the same thing to her. The same resource, the same structure. She had never examined what it meant that they were the same thing, because the sameness had always been convenient. Now the company was demonstrating, in the specific language of client calls, and investor concern and operational uncertainty, that they were not the same thing, that the company was a thing I had built with 8 years of labor that belonged to me, and my mother was experiencing, for the first time, the confusion of someone whose convenient assumption has been removed. I'll call you later in the week, I said. I didn't. She came to my apartment on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the resignation. I heard the elevator in the hallway. The building had an old elevator, slow and audible, and then the knock, which was not her usual knock. Her usual knock was confident. 2 sharp raps, the knock of someone who expects the door to open. This knock was different. 3 taps, softer, with a hesitation, between the second and third, that I had never heard from her before. I set down the file I was working on. I walked to the door. I opened it. My mother was standing in the hallway, in her gray wool coat, the good one, the one she wore when she wanted to feel composed, and her hair was slightly less precise than usual, as though she had not checked it before coming up, and her eyes were wet, not dramatically, not the performance of grief she sometimes deployed at family events, the contained maternal emotion, held up for rooms. This was different. These were the eyes of a woman who had been crying in a car on the way over and had not been able to stop completely before the elevator arrived. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not physically. She was the same height, the same silver hair, the same navy or gray or whatever careful color she had chosen that morning, but something in her bearing, the fundamental confidence of a woman who had always been certain that she understood her family, was different, cracked at the foundation, not destroyed, not yet, but cracked in the specific way that things crack when the weight they were built to hold shifts unexpectedly. We looked at each other. I had imagined this moment many times in the abstract, in the way you imagine outcomes you don't fully believe will happen, and in every version I had imagined, I had something to say, something clear, something earned, the words I had been composing, without knowing I was composing them, for years. But standing here, looking at my mother, in her slightly imprecise hair, and her wet eyes, and her too careful coat, I found that I didn't want to say anything yet. I wanted her to be here first, to arrive here in this hallway, in this specific diminishment, without me filling it immediately with language. I wanted her to stand in it. For a moment, she had been making me stand in things my entire life. I stepped back from the door. I didn't speak. I simply left it open, the door and the question of it, and walked back into the apartment. Whether she followed was something I had decided, standing there in the hallway light, to leave entirely up to her. Yet, she followed me in. I heard the door close behind her, not latched by me, by her, which meant she had decided something in the hallway and had acted on it. And I was already in the kitchen, filling the kettle, giving us both the small structural mercy of something to do with our hands. I didn't turn around. Sit wherever you want, I said. The apartment was not large. A 1-bedroom open plan, the living area merging into the kitchen, with only the island between them. I had furnished it carefully, over time, with the specific intention of making it feel like mine. Nothing performative, nothing chosen, for how it would appear to visitors. Books stacked on the floor, beside the couch because I hadn't gotten around to building the shelves. A print above the desk, abstract, mostly blue, that I had bought at a gallery on a Tuesday afternoon 2 years ago because I liked it, and for no other reason. My mother sat at the island. I heard the stool move. I heard her set her bag on the counter, with the small, careful sound of someone placing something down. Precisely. I set the kettle on the burner. I turned around. She was sitting upright, the posture she maintained. Even now, even here, even in whatever this was. But the effort of it was visible, in a way it never usually was. Like watching someone hold a position, after the muscle has already given. Her eyes were still wet, not spilling, held. I leaned against the counter, and crossed my arms, and looked at her, and waited. I don't know where to start, she said. Her voice was quieter than usual. The management in it, the careful shaping she applied to her speech, the way she applied it to everything, was present but thin. Start wherever you need to, I said. A pause. Daniel told me about the investors. Okay. And the clients, she paused again. 3 of them have indicated. They're following you. That's their decision, I said. Evelyn, I didn't solicit them, Mom. I didn't make calls, I didn't position myself against the company. They called me because their relationship was with me. That's not something I manufactured, it's something that existed because I built it. She was quiet. The kettle began its low pre-boil hum. I know, she said. I looked at her. I know, she said again. And the second time had a different quality, heavier, without the deflection. The first one still contained. What do you know? I said. Not aggressively, genuinely. Because in 34 years, my mother had never sat in my kitchen and said I know with that specific weight, and I wanted to understand exactly the shape of what she meant. She looked at her hands on the counter. I know that you built it, she said. The company, the clients, all of it, I know that. Did you always know? A longer pause. Outside, the city made its evening sounds. A siren somewhere moving away. The ambient hum of Capitol Hill, settling into Thursday night. I think, she said carefully, that I knew and didn't let myself know at the same time. I said nothing. That's not an excuse, she said. No, I said, it isn't. The kettle boiled. I made 2 cups, automatic, without asking because some habits exist below the level of the situation. And I set one in front of her, and kept one and sat on the stool, on the other side of the island. She wrapped her hands around the cup. I want to explain something, she said. I'm not trying to defend what happened. I just want you to understand where it came from. Okay, I said. She took a breath. When your father died, when he died and I suddenly had to understand what the company was, and what we owed and what we had. I was terrified. A pause. I had spent 30 years being someone's wife, running a household, being a mother, and suddenly I was being asked to understand things I didn't know how any of it worked. I looked at my tea, and then there was you, she said, sitting across from the accountant, and understanding it immediately, knowing what the problems were, knowing how to fix them. She paused, and I let you. The simplicity of it landed, with more weight than elaboration would have. I just let you. Not I exploited you. Not I chose Daniel over you. I just let you. The most honest version of a certain kind of failure. The passive kind. The kind that accumulates, without decision, without malice, without ever requiring the person to look directly at what they're doing. You were so capable, she said. You always had been, even when you were small. You never fell apart the way other children did, the way Daniel did. I fell apart, I said. She looked at me. I just did it privately, I said, because there wasn't space to do it any other way. Her expression moved. A slight reconfiguration, something shifting behind her eyes. I didn't know that, she said. You didn't ask, I said. Not cruelly. As information, the way you state a fact, that has been a fact for a long time, and simply hasn't been spoken. She looked down at her cup. No, she said, I didn't. The silence lasted a while. I let it. I had spent my entire life filling silence in this family, the conversational labor, the management of discomfort, the reflexive move towards smoothing, and I was not doing that tonight. Tonight the silence could stay, as long as it needed to. I always told myself, my mother said, after a while that I was hard on you, because you could take it. That Daniel he needed more gentleness, more protection. He was more sensitive. He was more distressed, I said. That's different from more sensitive. She looked up. Daniel performed his distress, I said. He let you see it, so you responded to it. I didn't perform mine, so you assumed. I didn't have any. A pause. That's not a measure of sensitivity. That's a measure of who learned to make their needs visible. and who learned to hide them. Her jaw shifted slightly. I made you hide them, she said. Not a question. The dynamic made me hide them, I said. You maintained the dynamic. She absorbed this. I watched her absorb it. The visible effort of a woman, receiving information that restructures, something foundational, that requires the simultaneous holding of I love my daughter, and I failed her substantially. Two things that feel like they should be mutually exclusive, but are not and never were. I prioritized Daniel, she said. The words came out with the specific flatness of something being stated, after years of not being stated. Emotionally, I always, when there was limited space or limited time, or limited, I gave it to him. Yes, I said, because I thought you didn't need it. Yes, I said, and because she stopped, I waited, and because it was easier, she said. There it was. Not the deepest truth. I wasn't sure my mother had full access to the deepest truth about herself, which is common, which is human, but the truest truth she was capable of tonight. It was easier. You were capable and self-sufficient, and didn't make scenes, and handled things, and I was tired, and Daniel was loud, in his need, and the path of least resistance ran through you, and I took it for 30 years. I know, I said. I'm sorry, she said. The words arrived small and unadorned, without the architecture of justification that usually surrounded my mother's communications about difficult things. Just, I'm sorry. I looked at her. I thought about what I wanted to say. There were many versions available to me. The version that forgave her immediately, warm, relieving the version that made the discomfort stop for both of us. The version that didn't forgive her, cold, definitive, the version that made her feel the full weight of what she was asking. Neither felt accurate. I hear you, I said. She looked up. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It does, it matters enormously. I paused, but I need you to understand that an apology in this kitchen on a Thursday night doesn't. It doesn't reach back and fill in 34 years of what wasn't there. Her eyes filled. I know, she said. I needed you to see me, I said. Not what I could do, not what I could handle or fix or carry. Me, the person underneath. All of that, I paused, and I waited for that for a very long time before I understood. It wasn't coming. I'm here now, she said. You're here now because the company is struggling without me, I said. The directness of it landed between us like something dropped, clean and hard and too precise to deflect. She didn't deflect it. Yes, she said. Just yes. And the honesty of that, the willingness finally to not manage her way around it, was something. Not enough, but something. What do you want from me? She asked after a while. Tell me what you want. I thought about Dr. Reeves. What do you want? I had spent a year learning to answer that question accurately. I want you to understand what happened, I said. Not the version where you made some mistakes, but you loved me and it all balances out. The actual version where the dynamic was unfair from the beginning, and it shaped me in ways I'm still understanding. She nodded, small, careful. And I want to stop, I said. She looked at me. I want to stop carrying it, I said. The company, the family logistics, the management of everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. I want to stop. I've already stopped, and I need you to accept that. I've stopped, not to try to put me back. A long silence. And if I accept that, she said, what does that leave us? I looked at my mother, at this woman I had loved my entire life in the specific, complicated way you love people who have shaped you through both their presence and their failures. I don't know yet, I said. That's an honest answer. I don't know what we are on the other side of this. Her face moved. But I know what we were, I said, and what we were wasn't working, not for me. She pressed her lips together. She looked at her hands. She looked like what she was, a 62-year-old woman, sitting in her daughter's kitchen at 9 in the evening, confronting the accumulated cost of 34 years of choices she had made without examining. She looked diminished, and I felt, sitting across from her, not triumph. I want to be precise about that. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not the hot cathartic release of a long-awaited confrontation. Finally arrived. Something more complicated. Grief, partly the grief of finally saying the true thing to someone who needed to hear it, which is never clean. It always takes something with it when it goes. Clarity, partly the specific lightness of having named something accurately that has been living unnamed in your body for years, and something underneath both, a kind of tired, worn tenderness for this woman who had loved me in the only ways she knew how, which had not been enough, which I was no longer willing to pretend had been enough, but which had been nonetheless. The love she was capable of. It wasn't what I needed. It was what she had. Those are different things. They were always different things. She left at 10:15. At the door she stopped, her hand on the frame, her coat buttoned, her bag over her shoulder, all the armor of a put-together woman, reconstructed for the walk, back to wherever she had parked. She turned. "The drawings," she said. I looked at her. "Daniel mentioned," he said. "You have drawings from when you were small." She paused. "I'd like to see them sometime, if you'd let me." I thought about the folder, the one in the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I had kept through every move, every transition, every restructuring of the life around it. 23 years of Sunday afternoons, a child drawing at a kitchen table, while a family moved around her, without noticing. "Maybe," I said. Not yes, not no. Maybe with the full weight of its uncertainty intact. She nodded. She looked at me for a moment, with the expression of a woman who had many more things to say, and understood tonight that she had lost the standing to say them on her own timeline. "Good night, Evelyn," she said. "Good night, Mom," I said. She walked into the hallway. I waited until I heard the elevator, the old slow mechanism of it, the doors opening, the pause, the doors closing, and then I closed my door. Not hard, not with the violence of finality that the movies reach for. In moments like this, softly, the latch catching with its small, precise click, the sound of a door that has been closed by someone who knows exactly what they're doing. I stood in my hallway for a long moment. The apartment was quiet around me. The books on the floor, the blue print above the desk, the cup of tea I hadn't finished, still on the island. Mind, all of it mind. I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up her cup, still warm, barely touched, and I poured it out. And then I stood at the sink, for a while looking at nothing, feeling the specific, exhausted weight of a person who has finally said the true thing, and is now on the other side of it, in the unfamiliar, necessary quiet of a life that has stopped, organizing itself around other people's comfort, learning slowly what it sounds like in here, when it's just her. 3 months later, I incorporated a new company. The paperwork took 11 days. The name took longer not because I was uncertain about the work, but because naming something that is entirely yours requires a different kind of care than naming something you're building for other people. I called it Meridian Logistics Partners. Meridian, the highest point of a celestial body's arc, the moment of maximum elevation. Before the descent, I chose it because I was done with descents. The office was a single floor, in a building on Western Avenue, smaller than what I'd had, deliberately because I was building this one at the pace that felt right, rather than the pace other people's needs required. 8 people at the start, all of them chosen carefully, none of them chosen because someone's mother thought they needed a role. Sandra Hale signed a letter of intent on the 2nd week. Marcus Hale followed on the 3rd. The Hargrove account transferred, formally on day 31, the morning after my notice period at Carter Logistics officially concluded. I did not celebrate. I made coffee. I sat at my new desk, smaller than the old one, facing a window that looked west toward the water, and I opened my laptop, and I started working, because the work had always been mine. It had just taken me this long to stop doing it inside someone else's frame. Carter Logistics contracted. I want to be precise about this, because precision matters, and because I am not telling this part with satisfaction, or not only with satisfaction. Real people worked there, 47 of them when I left. By the time 3 months had passed, that number was closer to 30. Some left voluntarily following the work, following the client relationships that had followed me. Some were let go as the revenue contracted, and Daniel made the operational decisions that fell to him now, some of them reasonable given the circumstances, some of them the decisions of a man working from instinct, where he should have been working from analysis. He was trying. I want to say that clearly, because it is true. Daniel was not lazy or malicious. He was a man who had spent his entire adult life inside an arrangement that had never required him to develop the capabilities the arrangement depended on, and now the arrangement was gone, and he was standing in the gap between what he was and what the situation required. That gap had always existed. I had been the gap's furniture. Now the gap was just the gap. He called me in the second month. I answered this time. He sounded different than the voicemail. The panic had settled into something quieter, which I recognized as a man adjusting to a new reality, rather than still resisting it. "I'm not calling to ask you to come back," he said, which told me he had considered calling to ask me to come back. "Okay," I said. I wanted to say something. I waited. "I didn't know," he said, "about the debt, the university stuff. Mom told me last month." I said nothing. "I didn't know you paid it." "I know you didn't," I said. That was a lot of money, Ev." "It was. I should have." He started again. "I should have been paying more attention to what was actually happening in the company, in the family. I should have been paying more attention." It was not a complete accounting, but it was more than I had ever heard from him, and it arrived without the defensive architecture he usually built around uncomfortable admissions, without the pivot to external factors, without the reframe toward his own difficulty. Just, "I should have been paying more attention." "Yes," I said, "you should have." A pause. "Are you okay?" he asked. The question surprised me, not because it was unusual, but because it was the first time in recent memory that he had asked it, without the implicit subtext of needing me to be okay, so that something could proceed. Just, "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," I said. "Good." A pause. "That's good." We stayed on the line for a moment, two people who had shared a childhood and a family and 30-plus years of a dynamic that had served one of them substantially better than the other, sitting with the specific, unresolved complexity of people who are neither enemies nor close, something more ambiguous than both. "Take care of yourself," I said. "You too," he said. I hung up. I sat with the call for a while. Its smallness, its insufficiency, the fact that it was also, in its way, a beginning, not of what we had, of something different, something neither of us had the language for yet. My mother texted. This was new. She had been a phone call person. Her entire life, the belief, generational and firm, that important things were communicated by voice, and that texting was for logistics. But in the weeks after, the Thursday night in my kitchen, she had started texting. Small things, careful things. A photo of the garden, the roses she kept in the side yard, coming into their late-season bloom. A sentence, "These did well this year." An article about a logistics industry conference in Portland, with a single line beneath it. "Thought you might find this useful." A question once on a Sunday. "Did you eat today?" Not "have you eaten?" "Did you eat today?" The specific present tense inquiry of someone learning to ask about the immediate person, rather than the general condition. I responded to most of them, not immediately, not with the reflexive speed of someone managing the other person's comfort. When I was ready, with the measured pace of someone learning to participate in a relationship from an honest position, rather than an accommodating one. It was not warmth yet, not the uncomplicated warmth I had wanted from her for 34 years, but it was different from what it had been, different and real, in the limited way real things can be when they are new and still finding their shape. Dr. Reeves said something in October that I have been thinking about since. We were in her office, the one in Capitol Hill, the one with the unremarkable view, and the good chair, and the specific quality of silence she maintained that made it possible to say things you hadn't known you were going to say, and I had been describing the months since the resignation, the new company, the calls, the conversation with my mother, the text messages from a woman who had been a phone call person her entire life. And she said, "What does it feel like right now? In your body?" I thought about it. "Lighter," I said. "Then what?" "Then I've felt in a long time. Maybe ever. In the context of the family specifically. What do you think changed?" I looked at the window. I stopped needing them to give me what they couldn't give. I said, "I spent 34 years waiting for an acknowledgement that was never going to arrive in the form I needed it. And I stopped waiting." How did that happen? I thought about the letter. My father's handwriting. "You are not adequate at this. You are exceptional." Someone finally told me what I already knew, I said, and it gave me permission to stop pretending. I didn't know it. She was quiet for a moment. That permission, she said, did it come from outside you, or did it come from you? I sat with the question. Both, I said finally. He said it, but I was ready to hear it. I don't think I would have been earlier. She nodded. That readiness, she said, is yours. I looked at my hands. Mind, the word I was learning to use accurately, not as claim or conquest, but as simple, factual truth. This is mine. This work is mine. This life is mine. I am allowed to build it around what I actually am, rather than what I can provide. The trip was Sandra's idea. A conference in London, Supply Chain Innovation Summit. 3 days, the kind of event I had attended before, as a representative of someone else's company, and had never attended as the founder of my own. You should go, she said. Present the Meridian model. Let people see what you're building. I had looked at the calendar. The dates were the first week of November. November had always been the family month, Thanksgiving, preparations, the accumulated logistics of holidays that I had managed for years with the invisible precision of someone who makes things happen for people who don't notice. The happening, this November, I would be in London. I booked the flight. My mother knew about the trip. I had told her not to explain myself, not to seek permission, but because she was my mother, and telling her felt like the beginning of what a different relationship might look like, one in which I shared information, voluntarily rather than withheld it defensively. She had said that sounds like an important opportunity, which was not the same as, I'm so proud of you, but it was also not. What about Thanksgiving? It was new, careful and small and new. She drove me to the airport. I hadn't asked her to. She had offered and I had considered the offer for a day before accepting it, not because I needed the ride, but because I understood that the offer was something other than logistics. It was the beginning of a language she was trying to learn. I let her learn it. The drive was 40 minutes. We talked about small things, the traffic on I-5, the weather. In London, she had looked up and mentioned with the careful interest of someone who has decided to pay attention to their child's life. From a different position, we talked about Daniel. Briefly, he had brought in a new operations consultant, which I had heard about through Sandra and which was, I thought, the right decision. He was learning, slowly at the cost of things that might have been avoided, but he was learning. He asked about you, my mother said. Last week, not about the company, just how you were. I know, I said. He called. She glanced over. You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now, I said. She looked back at the road. A small adjustment. A breath. Good, she said. That's good. The terminal was the familiar busy of a Tuesday morning departure, the specific moving density of people going somewhere, the anonymous purposefulness of an airport at 9 a.m. She pulled to the curb. I got out, retrieved my bag from the trunk, one carry-on deliberately, because I had learned to travel light in ways I was still figuring out, applied beyond luggage. She came around the car. We stood on the curb, in the November cold, the terminal behind me, the drop-off lane moving, its continuous loop beside us. She looked at me, and I saw something in her face that I had not seen there before. Not the proud, contained warmth she showed at Daniel's public moments, not the efficient affection of a woman managing her family. Something simpler, plainer, the face of a woman looking at her daughter and seeing her, not the capable one, not the strong one, not the one who handled things, just her, maybe for the first time, maybe too late and maybe not. Have a good trip, she said. Her voice was smaller than usual. I will, I said. I hugged her, not the brief, efficient hug of our habitual departures, but longer, real, the kind that acknowledges two people who have hurt each other and are trying with imperfect tools to find something true on the other side of it. She held on for a moment before letting go. I picked up my bag. I'll call when I land, I said. She nodded. I walked through the terminal doors. I did not look back, not because I was done with her, not because I had closed something permanently and walked away clean, but because I was going somewhere, forward, my own direction, for the first time in a very long time. The forward motion wasn't towards something I owed anyone. It was towards something I wanted. I found my gate. I sat by the window. Outside, the tarmac moved. Through its industrial morning. Planes, vehicles, the gray sky. Above Seattle pressing low. And I opened my laptop. And I started writing the presentation I would give in London. About the company I had built. From nothing, not nothing. From 34 years of learning. What I was made of. From the specific endurance. Of a woman who had carried. More than her share. For longer than was fair. And had finally, at 34, decided that carrying her own life, with both hands, was enough, was more than enough, was in fact, everything. My mother stood at the window of the terminal's upper level, for a long time after the doors had closed behind me. I didn't know this. I learned it later, from Daniel, who had called her, while she was still there, and heard in her voice, something he didn't have, a word for. She watched the terminal below, the moving density of it, looking, I think, for the shape of me in the crowd, the daughter she had spent 34 years looking past, and was only now learning how to see. She stood there for a while, then she walked back to her car. She drove home alone. She sat in the house that I had paid for, the house that was quiet in the way. Houses are quiet when they have lost the person who kept them running, and for the first time, in a very long time, she felt the full weight of what that quietness meant. Yeah.
I was a prisoner